Hey there, folks. Welcome back to another episode of the East to West Hunts podcast. Today we are mobile in a vehicle on the road to a hunting trip out west. And the beauty of this is we get to talk all things hunting as usual. But we have Darin here sitting next to me. Say hello, Darin.
Hey, how are you guys?
Awesome. And Darin here is a really, really good friend of mine. He also happens to be my neighbor, and he's also an East to West Hunts client. So this is kind of great. And really, the topic today is going from being a Midwestern whitetail hunter to a first-time elk hunter. And we're really going to talk about commitment, fitness, gear, and we're probably going to go on some random tangents, I'm sure.
As we always do.
Yeah, but the cool thing is it really puts in perspective for the folks that are wanting to go out west what you felt it really took. And I know there's a lot to it,
Yeah.
and it could be overwhelming for folks. And for me, I feel like I'm a little bit maybe on the other end where I talk about it a lot, but I really will value your perspective and really, really hearing it on your end. So, good deal. This is cool too, just being on the road here. So
Yeah. So
so
I'm looking straight ahead or I get distracted. There's justified reasons why.
yeah, have at it, man. That's fair enough. You're
Yeah.
driving, so I just figured this would be really, really cool.
Yeah, no, this is cool.
Do it videoing, and we're on the road and get a podcast in at the same time to actually talk about what's about to happen.
Yep.
So we're headed out west. We're headed to Colorado. We have an elk hunt. Really, I have a mule deer tag, but we got other guys that have elk tags. Darin's got an elk tag, and we are actually on the way right now to pick up Kent from the First Gen Hunter podcast, as he's headed out with us as well. So this is going to be a really, really good time.
Yeah.
So I really would like to frame up this episode, and then we will have an episode on the way back as well for the experience of what actually happened on the hunt. So stay tuned for that, as that will be the next one. But with that said, I want you to really kind of frame this up, Darin. You know, we talked about doing the hunt, and you really wanted to get out west, and then it kind of like just came to fruition. And I think if you look at it today, you probably say, boy, time flew.
Yeah.
So I guess take the listeners and viewers through, and even me, right? Because I want to hear this, but take us through, like, how do you feel right now? And then we're going to walk back in time to when we really first talked about it.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess I'll walk everybody through. I know, Alex, you know my story, but for all the listeners out there, my transition or evolution, so to speak, in the hunting. How do I feel right now? I'm excited. I am stoked. A little anxious. Just I have an idea what to expect, but being out west, for the first time in the backcountry, hiking up mountains, looking forward to it. Not sure, exactly what to expect from weather, from people, pressure, but just excited to take it all in. You know, I'm excited for the camaraderie with, obviously my good friend Alex and neighbor here, some of the other guys coming with us. Just take it all in, get all the experience that I can, through this process. And if we happen to see elk, great. If we happen to shoot one, even better. But, Alex and I have been talking. There's been a lot of good things that have happened, I guess, in this last week leading up to this trip. So we have a really good feeling about this hunt. At least I do. So, obviously hope for the best. But Alex, through East to West, organized this Western hunt. I mean, we started these conversations probably a solid year ago. The idea brewed. And then, every month we'd have a meeting. We had about 5 or 6 of those meetings with the group and the intentions. And I think we started those probably, we're here at the end of October. Those conversations started probably April.
Yeah. I like to hold those monthly meetings with group. as we go closer to the actual hunting time.
So,
And I think
and
that was advantageous. I've seen it work with other groups. So I think it was good.
totally was, totally was. So yeah, so we decided, hey, got the date on the calendar, and then just the planning point started, right? We made the commitment, we were going to do it. Um, we opened it up to the group and got the date set, and then started really planning from there. And to finally now it's come to fruition. We're here, we're driving. A lot led up to it. A lot of prep, a lot of exercise, getting in shape, getting gear, clothing.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
let's talk about that.
let's do it.
So you mentioned prep. Let's talk fitness first, right? So I know
Yeah.
I'm big on it, right? Working out
Yep.
and lifestyle and all that fun stuff. But you mentioned it was a year ago, or maybe I think it was more, honestly, because I think I
Probably.
put it in your head, and then we started kind of talking about it. But let's talk fitness, right? Like, what did you do this year, and how has that kind of evolved for you as far as doing different things, or
Yeah.
um, I guess what have your workouts even been like?
Yeah, no, good question. So, I've always been on the heavier side. And having something like this, sort of a goal to work towards, to get in shape and lose weight, and get into a regimented workout, workout plan, workout structure, for me was good. Alex had found this Outdoor Vitals 100-mile challenge that he proposed to me,
Yeah, that was
uh,
good.
where you'd have to, where you'd hike 100 miles either consecutively in one trip, or in a series of three overnight trips. So, Alex approached me with it. I said, yeah, sure. Sounds like a great idea. This was a good way to test gear, and we'll probably talk about that topic at some point as well.
Yeah, for sure.
But the 100-mile challenge to hike, 100 miles, we did it in three overnight trips. So, we're talking three trips, 35 miles we did, 20 miles, over 20 miles in one day, sleeping overnight in the back country, and then doing another 10 plus to get to 35 miles. We did that this summer. Honestly, for me, it was really more just about getting out there and doing stuff.
Yeah.
So, I was, to prepare for the 100 miles, they had a specific training program just to really get out there, walk, log miles, whether that's in your neighborhood or whether those are, scheduled hikes and things like that. But almost like you're training for some type of endurance event, like a marathon, or, something of that nature, right? So where you're working, you're building, you're logging miles, and then you taper down before the trip. So that helped, put together, a good plan. I started doing a cycle class once a week at the gym. That was helping. It was really just, it kind of kick-started me to just get out there and exercise. Whether that's getting on the treadmill and running, waking up early, going for a run in the neighborhood, going for a walk in the neighborhood, or rucking in the neighborhood. I think the closest part of leading up to this has been really just testing the pack, testing the gear, the boots, getting comfortable with everything. So really rucking, putting, 30 to 40 pounds in a pack, and, walking around the neighborhood for 3 to 4 miles.
Yeah.
So, that, and then just kind of calisthenic work, right? Push-ups, crunches, planks, squats, things like that have, just to kind of build core strength, has been the process. It hasn't been anything specific, like a specific exact routine, but it's, I think, a compilation of a ton of different things leading up to today. So, through the process, I think the 100 miles, really put things in perspective for me, with how, difficult and going through the pain process, of that for me, I think really opened my eyes that I need to drop some weight before this. And so, on the podcast here now, I think it's, happy to say that I'm down 13 pounds.
Nice.
Than when I started. So that's been a positive. Um, and yeah, working on the fitness, going out running, and I think my cardio, my stamina is up.
I was about to say your endurance
Yeah,
has to be higher. I mean, what was interesting was in the 100-mile challenge, and mind you, I wanted you to do it because I felt like that was going to be a good thing. I know I am like one of those people that I like having something in front of me just gives me purpose, right? So like
yep,
hunting for me is really my purpose for working out
yeah,
because I always want to be in shape for being in the mountains. So it's nice to just have that chase, but it is nice to have kind of a shorter term goal set, like an event like that. But I thought it was I don't know if you remember, but we were talking about it. It was like the first weekend we went, and it was when we hit that mile 15 or 16,
yeah,
and we were talking about how I felt at that moment was like with a 50-pound pack on
yeah.
would be equivalent to like 5.5 miles in the mountains.
That's
But
right.
we had like a 30-pound pack
Yep,
and we were like 15 or 16 miles, but we didn't have that elevation gain or the
right.
incline or all that. But that was like a really good point for me where I was just like, all right, yeah, I can feel the similarities, but it was cool to be able to like tell you, hey, this is probably how you are going to feel when you're in
Right.
the mountains at this point, because for me, the goal was, well, we're doing it. It's a workout. It's tough. It's overnight camping, the whole deal. But it was a little bit about feeling that endurance pain, like the suck,
The
like there
suck,
is a
yeah.
suck
There
factor.
is a suck. And I think ultimately, the conclusion to that and the lessons learned is, I mean, I'm a better man for doing that challenge 100%. Different perspective for sure. But I think with a lot of those endurance races really is, the discipline that it takes to prepare for it,
Yeah,
the
that's true.
discipline that it takes to actually do it, and having, an accountability partner to get out there and do it. Um, but it's embracing the pain and embracing the suck and like really, accepting the suffering that it's going to bring to yourself, your body, both physically and mentally. And that was eye opening for me. I think one of the questions that one of the guys we're hunting with had on one of our calls was, well, what should I be doing, or how do I know that I'm like in shape to do
Oh, the
this, right?
cardio, the
The
cardio
cardio
stuff. Yeah,
question, right? And like,
I think it was about a treadmill
we
or
were
what
talking about
incline to be on a
stairmasts. Yeah,
treadmill
what
or
incline to
something.
be on a treadmill, and for how long can I be able to do
Yeah,
this? And there isn't a set answer, and I think that's what we concluded. But to know when we were on that hike, like, all right, we've been hiking for 15 miles,
hmm
5, 6 hours at this point with 30 pounds on our back in 75-degree weather. You know,
hmm
this is how it feels to hike 5 miles in the mountain. Like, that was, I think, it answered that question for us. And I think it's going to be obviously different depending on what type of exercise you're doing.
Sure, sure.
I think we landed on the Stairmaster being a really good,
Yeah.
way to build up and prepare for this.
What other training things did you do?
Like I said, nothing earth shattering. I think the biggest piece that, you and I talked about is just getting out there and doing something.
Yeah, you got to move.
Just got to move and not overthinking it. Um, but just pushing your body a little bit, and getting those muscles that maybe haven't worked in a little while, and getting them some attention and worked out.
Yeah, I think the moral of the story is you got to move. A lot of guys wait until it's like the last 3 months. They're like, oh, I got to get in shape. I hear that all the time. I got to get in shape for the hunt. And I'm like, dude, your hunt's in 10 weeks. You know, I'd have been quite disappointed if that was you in that regard, especially for this. So it's like
Yeah,
being a proponent of the fitness side is really really big, and it helps with everything, right? With weight loss, your conditioning, benefits of blood pressure, cholesterol, whatever for
yeah,
anybody. So there's always a lot of other secondary benefits to the training, but you just can't do the equivalent of high elevation if you're in flatland,
yeah,
but you certainly can still train your muscles to
for
be able
sure.
to take more load. I think that's a big component to it. So
Yep.
so cool. So I'm curious on your gear.
Yeah.
I know you've had a lot of gear, and I think in reality, gear is probably one of the more fun things to talk about.
Absolutely.
So, you go hunt whitetails, you get your gear for your whitetail stuff. How much of the whitetail stuff has actually transitioned into your Western hunting kit at this point that you took out
Yeah.
here?
If I think about it, it's really not that much. I think there's the items from the whitetail hunt, right? Like I'm not taking the bibs and parka, that I use to keep warm, in a sitting position or standing position for
Okay.
whitetail. I think a lot of the gear through, working, in hunting whitetail, I've since upgraded, for a hunt like this. For example, my rangefinder,
Yeah.
right? And having gripes with my rangefinder, which was, a Vortex Ranger 1000, and just having trouble hitting deer, and getting a reading off a deer that's, 200 yards or, north of 200. It was upgrading that, getting better binoculars and things that, as over time you hunt and you realize what you like or what you want or what you need, and upgrading those things, but very little, very little. I think out of all the stuff I use whitetail hunting, I think I'm using my base layers, my tripod that I have.
Okay.
I had a rangefinder and I had binoculars, but I've upgraded those for this hunt.
Yeah. So you upgraded them,
But I've had them.
but,
Right.
but well, regardless, I think upgrading them
Yep.
it's a good thing, right?
Yep.
Upgrade's a good thing usually.
Um,
Why'd you upgrade though? I know you.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, the rangefinder thing, that's a pretty common one.
Yeah.
Because I even remember for myself, I've had plenty, but that's a pretty common one from the whitetail guy because you're just not used to even like thinking that you're going to shoot the same lengths,
right.
right? I mean,
Right.
what's the farthest whitetail shot you ever taken?
So, that I've taken and been successful, or that I've taken.
Whatever that you've taken. I mean,
So taken and been
a couple
successful,
hundred
165 yards.
Yeah, I mean-
taken a couple hundred.
Yeah. So I mean, you're
Yeah.
talking 200 yards.
Yeah.
That's like, ironically enough, like if you talk to a guide out west, they'd probably tell you like most shots are going to be around 200 yards.
No shots. Yeah. You said no or
No,
most?
most shots.
Whitetail.
Yeah. No. Out west.
You said most will be at 200.
Yeah. Most guides would tell you that you need to be able to like shoot at 200 yards because
Just
most shots are somewhere around that length.
okay.
But you want to be able to shoot further,
Right.
right? Like you want to be able to have a 3 or 4 or 500 yard ability with the rangefinder. And a lot of rangefinders will be super slow to get you that. Like I remember hunting a antelope and I killed it at 551 yards. I had the hardest time with my rangefinder.
Yeah.
I mean, I sat there clicking and clicking and clicking and clicking, and finally I got a read at like 500. So I remember dialing the thing, not actually knowing if it was actually correct or not.
Yep.
And I had like 500, 501, 520, 501, and I was like, oh, man, I'm just moving it to 5 and hitting it. And it hit right where I needed to be. But at the end of the day, like I ranged it from where we were to where the animal was, and we were at 551 because I dropped it in its tracks.
Mhm.
And then when I got home, I got a new rangefinder.
Yeah.
So that's
It's
a good one.
It's those experiences, right?
Yeah.
Like I remember hunting with, my wife's cousin, and it was his first time, shooting a deer, and I remember we were just trying to range just to see how far the deer were from where we were sitting in the blind, and they were probably 250, 220, and just having a hard time gunning them, and not having that confidence, right? That number is super important.
For sure.
Especially if you're using it's super important, right? From an accuracy perspective, because if you miss, you're gonna think about it a bazillion times over and what went wrong, and to know that it could have been distance,
That, and I don't want to wound the animal,
right?
Right.
Of course,
So
So
what is so binoculars? Why'd you upgrade those?
So you had you gave me a taste of the stabilizing binoculars.
Oh, you like that, huh?
And yeah, so I had the Diamondback HD 10 by 42s.
Yeah.
They were good entry level bino. And I think for anybody getting into hunting, entry level gear is perfectly fine, right? It gets you using it, gets you, and then from that point on, you work your way up and figure out what you like, what's important, what works well, what doesn't. Um, you test things out, and the stabilization was huge for me.
Uh-huh.
Like a lot of us, even, in those high adrenaline situations, you shake, you're gonna shake. Um, but I think the biggest thing
Get the shakes.
is the stabilization, and allows you to see maybe some things that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. Um,
Yeah, I noticed that. I, I'm not using the stabilized ones, but I know what you're talking about. I don't have the same size, I don't think, as you. What size
yeah,
are
so
you calling?
I have the 12 by
Yeah.
42s, the Sig Zulu sixes. Um, and then I mean, there's pros and cons to anything, any gear, right? Like um, those are going to limit your field of view. The glass isn't the best, Um, so it's just give and take, I guess,
It's
in
always give and take.
every specific situation. Weight is a factor.
Yep.
Um,
Those are light though.
yeah,
Those are super light. I was actually very impressed with all of their sizes. I like the itty bitty ones myself. I like the 10 by 30s.
yep,
Those are my favorite whitetail ones. But but yeah, out west, I had the 16s last year when I went to Wyoming, and I would say they were great on stabilization. I still wanted them on a tripod regardless, so that kind of threw that portion out for me, but left a little bit to be desired in the low light scenario for me.
yeah,
So, and I had my Swaros with me, so I got to play with those too and check them out. And just the pop and the amount of light that it was in was quite shocking. So, again, your point, there's give and take,
yeah.
and stuff like that. But that'll be a cool thing for you to play around with.
But the
Um,
gear was fun, man. The gear was fun. I remember telling you, like, there was a point at which I think I had everything I needed, and I'm like, I'm kind of sad this is over.
it is fun. I mean, that's why
Yeah,
like gear is marketable. People enjoy it. There's always advancements to it. There's always new
yeah,
technology, but there is a fun factor to it, especially with like I think that's fun also to fine tune. So like, you know, you're going into now a completely different system for Western hunting. So you had to get like layers and all that jazz
yeah.
too, right? So uh, that's why I was kind of curious how much stuff kind of transferred over from
Yeah.
whitetail to you. But did you end up buying like a whole new kit, or did you piece some stuff together that you had for your like clothing?
So clothing was a big eye opener for me. Learning about clothing. I think, some of the calls that we had, and leading up to this hunt, um, and learning about the different layering systems. And obviously you have that for whitetail. Whitetail, I think, for an entry level person like me, was really just how do I stay as warm as possible?
Yeah.
Right? I'm sitting in a
Well, because you're
blind,
sitting.
I'm sitting in a stand. How do I stay as warm as possible? And,
Yep.
if I need to take some stuff off, sure. But here, where weight is a factor, um, that plays a big role in the consideration. So I did upgrade. I kept the same base layering system that I have, which is basically just these 32-degree base layers that I got from Costco. They work fine. Um, maybe at some point down the road, I'll upgrade those. But, then that going into that mid layer system, wanting something that is light, but that's going to keep me warm enough. So I'm a Kuiu fan. I had ordered, some of their items, have been experimenting with their items, for, probably a couple of years now. I like the ultralight aspect.
Yeah, I
Um,
can see that.
and so, I ended up with, getting a Peloton, 200 hoodie,
Okay.
to be my mid layer, and then getting the Kuiu Axis hybrid pant, good for late season hunts,
Yeah, that's pretty kind of
breathable.
heavy duty.
Yeah. Um, I think the one item that I, experimented with is going belt versus suspenders.
Oh,
And
I love
I'm
suspenders.
a bigger guy, man,
I
and
love suspenders.
when we did that 100-mile challenge, um I really realized that those, with that pack really brings down those pants below my my crack. There's some deer. A lot of deer.
Nice.
A lot of deer.
Look at that.
About a
All
dozen in the field over there.
All right. Yeah, we had to lose focus for a second there.
Yeah.
That's what happens. That's what happens when you're driving.
Getting in the mode. But yeah, you know the suspenders, you know, I kind of created my own little bib action with those pants, and I think they work out well for me. Um, and then having the rain gear and having the down gear, you know, was something that you know, lightweight, um, you know, down and rain gear was something that I had to buy. So you know, that I think, you know, I did buy a soft shell jacket.
Okay.
Um,
Is that the Kutana or whatever as well?
no, that is that was actually the Axis hybrid
Got it. Got it.
jacket. Um, and I bought that more for just everyday use, you know, fall, you know, weather gets starting to get a little bit colder, but you know, I figured I brought it on this hunt too. I don't know if I'm gonna, you know, bring it up the mountain with me, but um, you know, just having that option. But I think it's, you know, my base layers. I got my mid layers, you know, the Peloton and the pants, and then having the soft shell, or I'm sorry, the rain gear, which will be in my pack, and then having the down gear, which will be in my pack. You know, I tend to sweat a lot. You know, I realized really quickly, and you know, you're talking fitness, and you know, there was a period I was waking up at, you know, 5:30 in the morning, and you know, going and rucking with my pack with 30, 40 pounds in it,
Okay.
for 3 or 4 miles in the morning, and I realized, you know, even in weather like 40, 45 degrees, you know, I'm sweating.
Yeah.
I'm sweating. Even, you know, that whole that area with, you know, where the backpack meets your back is always, for me, it's always sweat.
Yeah.
So
soaked with that
so I think
right up there, not breathing.
yep. So I think just being you know, being cognizant of that, and you know, knowing I'll probably be doing a lot of hiking in my, you know, my mid layers, or you know, maybe even just a t-shirt.
Yeah, that brings up an interesting point because the whole point of the whole layering system is to give you the most heatability, but also to reduce perspiration,
Right.
right? Because it's, excuse me, it's cold, right? So, like, let's say, for example, we're going up the mountain, it's 20 degrees.
Yeah.
You don't want to bundle yourself up and then get everything soaked, and then you're going to go sit in glass and it's just like frozen, right? So having that like ability to have something breathable, and you are going to sweat, but you're less likely to sweat as much if you don't have as much stuff on you.
Yeah.
And then that also will evaporate off of you, so that way when you're sitting, now you can go put stuff on that's not soaked. It's going to keep you warm, and you know, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
It really does make sense, but it is so different from, you know, for somebody that's used to just whitetail hunting and coming out west, like that's a big difference. And the clothing, I'm all for like saving money and transferring as much as you can, but the old bib and parka are not going to be making it down the mountain or up the mountain if we say
I'll
that.
be rolling down that mountain.
Yeah, you really would. Or you'd be frozen on the top of it.
Yeah.
You know, from how sweaty it is.
Yeah.
So that's cool. All right, so you got your layering system. What stuff do you feel was like super beneficial? Because I know we talked about it, and I'm really big on you got to use and test your stuff.
Yeah.
Any like particular things that you feel like, man, I'm glad that I actually tested it or I used it?
I think the biggest thing, I talked about that a little bit, was the pants. You know, and just the belt not working out.
Oh, and that's why you had.
And that's why I went to the suspenders. So I think the clothing's got to be comfortable. You know, obviously your boots and how you're gonna have your clothing, and but you know, I think the biggest thing is pack right, making sure the pack fits right, fits appropriately. I remember you and I, when we were testing out my pack, we did some rucking, and you know, I didn't have it set up right, and it was kind of bothering me in my shoulders, and you know, we adjusted the shoulders down a little bit, the base part of the shoulders down, to size it. So
because I remember yours are Velcro, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so yours were the Velcro ones, and we were moving them around to fit it for your torso.
Yep.
Yep. And that made a difference because I remember like instantly you were like, man, that feels so much better when you're hiking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, your pack, obviously testing the pack and then testing the gear system overall and making it work for you and organizing things where you want them, right? And all the stuff you're going to have with you. It's not just an accumulation of stuff, but, you're obviously going to minimize what you're bringing. Everything you're bringing is going to have a specific purpose. And
You would hope.
you'd hope. I mean, we learned that the hard way. I learned that the hard way, in doing that 100-mile challenge and, hiking 35 miles in 2 days. You realize real quick that weight does matter. And when
It
you talk ounces, it may not seem like a lot, a few ounces here and there, but they sure do add up.
Yeah. Did you think I was crazy when I was talking about the lightweight?
Yeah. I mean, like, you don't really take, like, for me, it was total ignorance, right? So,
I'm such a weight weenie. That's why.
yeah. Yeah. And it's like, it can't be that bad, or, it's
What's
one of those things where, that old adage where, sometimes you just got to make your own mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, some of that is a factor. Like, you gotta
Yeah.
go through it and make those mistakes and learn. But that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, organizing the gear, um, playing around with your cook system and, knowing how that works, um, what works well in that cook system, sleep system, you're for sure. I mean, when I first got my tent, we're going to use different tents, heated tents here,
Yes.
but
Yeah, we got heated tents.
messing around with a new tent, I mean, it's always going to take you longer to set that tent up, or your sleeping pad, or just being comfortable even in your sleeping bag or your quilt or whatever you're using.
Yep.
I don't know. For me, it relieves a little bit of anxiety. When I just know my stuff and my system, and I'm good with it. I'm comfortable with it, and it's. I would go to the next step and say you have to use your stuff more than once, even.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean,
Right?
you gotta
Like
have multiple times with it. Just putting your tent together once is gonna make you feel
3, 4,
confident in
5
it.
times even.
Yeah.
I had an issue with my tent and the way the poles were going through. Uh, their guided spots and getting that tangled, and what's the best way to even remedy that situation if it happened in the field. Um,
Yep.
and even first aid, to an extent, what are the things that are going to happen? Bringing Luco tape, does it work?
Oh yeah, blisters.
Blisters,
Yeah,
and
you definitely work those.
you know,
Did you get blisters in your boots?
my new boots, yes, yeah, I did. So my new boots. I think the socks I was using was playing a factor.
Okay.
So I upgraded those to some more um, padded socks.
Okay. You think
And
the padding was the factor?
sometimes with that stuff, it's either that or it's the breaking in of the
Yeah.
boot, right?
I'm curious on that because I think I use sock liners,
Yeah,
so I can't tell anymore if it's the sock or what the deal is, because for me the game changer is the liners.
the liners. Yeah,
But my boots are broken in; they've been broken in
Yeah.
for years. So that's a curiosity point of mine.
I did notice towards after the boots have been a little more broken in, when I wear like my base Cabela socks versus these Kuiu padded socks,
Okay.
my feet are definitely more comfortable. So
So you got those cushy Kuiu ones.
yep.
I forgot what those are called, but I think they're
I
like
forget.
some kind of cushion something.
Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, I mean, the gear part is the fun part, and getting all that gear and messing around with it and playing around with it, and appreciating it for what it is.
It really is the fun part.
It was fun.
So what about when I think about elk hunting and I talk to somebody about it, and same conversation with you too, but I'd love to hear it from your perspective. Like it can be daunting, right? Like you're talking about, man, we're going to go out west, we're going to do this. Like you're going to embark on this journey. It's a pretty big commitment,
Yeah.
and a lot of times it can scare people, right? Because it's like, there's so much stuff. I got to accumulate this amount of stuff. And now I got to commit to like, oh my God, maybe I'm not in shape, or maybe I've never done this on the mountain. I got to learn all these things, and then I got to do X, Y, Z. Like, how's that commitment thing feel now, looking back at all the stuff that you had to do? Because I feel like you did commit a lot into it.
Yeah, we started planning this hunt over a year ago, right?
Easy.
The idea of the hunt came about over a year ago.
Yeah, because I've been doing your tags for a couple of years now.
Yep. And I remember last year, you were like, hey, do you have if you draw a tag this year, would you want to go out west? And part of that was, I don't think it's going to be good timing because my son was going to be born, and he was born last summer.
Yep.
And then, really, I don't feel comfortable going out there on my own, not really knowing what it is, right?
Yep.
So we were talking about maybe doing, a combined group hunt together where we could kind of learn this stuff and, almost put together like a program and getting us to be able to learn what it takes to go out west, right? It's daunting for somebody, I mean, the simple question of even like, can I fly with a gun? Like so many people that I've
that's such a common question.
So many people that I've talked to, literally, like I tell people I'm going to Colorado for an elk hunt, and they're like, well, like, how are you bringing your gun over there? Can you just like fly it on an airplane?
It's so
and, like
funny.
I had the same question.
It's
like,
so
how do
funny
you,
how many people ask that, and it's not that like complicated, but I can see it. It's concerning, right? Because it's like, man, it's a gun, it's a firearm. People are freaked out by it.
Oh yeah,
And then you like, I know we're not flying, but
yeah.
For listeners and viewers, if you have not flown with a gun before, it is super simple. But you got to have the right case. You got to be able to have some locks on it, some TSA locks. And you literally go to the counter and you're like checking it in like it's luggage. You just got to prove that it's empty, and then they give you a little signing waiver. You put it in your actual hard case, then you lock it, and then they'll usually take it to some like TSA agent to like check it for like residue, it's got explosives or something in it, or the cases. They like either will put it through a mechanism or they like test it with some swabs and stuff, and then it goes as like checked baggage.
Yeah.
And then when you land, it's gonna come to like oversized baggage, and you have to go and you have to have like an ID that matches your ticket on it.
Okay.
Your little band, whatever, your luggage tag.
Yep.
And you get it. I mean, that's it. There's really nothing to it. And then and you need to have your ammo in a ammo box, whether it's like a plastic ammo box bin kind of a deal that I've used, like almost looks like a 3x5 index card deal, or you just use like the manufacturer ammo, which I would tell you just use the manufacturer ammo box.
Yeah.
Put it in there. That's it. But that's so daunting for so many folks.
The ammo, what do? You keep it separate out of the case?
No, you keep it in your case.
Oh, you keep it in the case. It
Yep.
has to be separate.
Yep, because your gun's empty.
Okay.
And then you have, like, you don't have your gun loaded, and there's nothing in the magazine.
Right.
If you have a magazine. You just have your ammo box, like, next to it.
Okay, in the case.
That's it.
Simple. But, I don't know, you got off topic.
Yeah, that was off topic, but it's a little bit different, right? Because with hunt planning, when I do it with clients, it's like we're to design where and how to. But here, like we did as a group, we did monthly meetings essentially leading up to it, and that could give you a lot more information. But the goal was like to make it as least daunting as possible because of questions like that can be answered,
Right. So we were talking, I think, going back, we were talking commitment.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't even know how we landed on that.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's typical. I think it's the subway.
Maybe. It's a Subway. We've been driving for 6 hours now.
That's good conversation, though. I mean,
yeah.
The reality is, like, that's all the stuff that it's all the stuff that we've kind of built up.
Yeah.
You in particular.
Yep.
And it's good to see. But yeah, but talk about the personal commitment, because I always see it as like, man, I'm really posing this, and I'm like, are you serious right now?
Yeah.
Because like I need to know that you're serious to commit to this, otherwise like it ain't gonna work.
Yeah. So I think the planning for something like this starts well in advance, and I think about it in three ways, right? I think you know, are you ready to make the financial commitment? Buying
That's a
the
big point.
buying the gear, um, the amount of money that it takes to travel, um, the cost for the tag, if you're going guided, whatever that all looks like. So are you ready to make the financial commitment?
Yep.
Two, are you ready to make the work impact commitment, right? So like work in two ways, work of your actual career and what you do for a day job. Are you able to take enough time, to go and hunt? And are you able to, take the time to prepare for that hunt, whether that's fitness,
Yes.
buying gear, testing the gear, whatever that looks like, from a work perspective. Um, you know, you have enough PTO days. Is the timing going to work out? Do you have a big project at work during
Yep.
that coincides with that time frame? And then the third is, personal commitment. And I think for me, that was the biggest piece is the personal commitment. And there's a lot of factors there, right? It's for me, I'm married and I have three children. To be able to take like the work thing is not a big deal for me. I'm thankfully I'm my own boss, and I own a business and I can take time off, and I have partners, that work with me that can absorb, me being away for a longer period of time. Um, but it's more my family now, right? So like my kids and my wife, and leaving them at home for 9 days, like, are am I okay with that? Am I going to be okay with that? And are they okay? Are they going to be okay with that? Right? Are they going to be okay? And does my wife have the support that she needs? If I'm not there, and God forbid something happens, whatever that looks like, right? But then it's the time away from family to, whether that's shopping, researching the gear, and then working out, right, and getting in shape,
Yeah.
and testing the gear.
All of that is a commitment.
Yeah,
It's time.
it's time.
Time is the biggest commitment.
Well, time and money, right? Those are the two biggest things always,
I feel
right?
like they transfer a little bit though. Time is money.
It is. It is.
You know what I mean?
It absolutely is. But I mean, like, thankfully I have a completely supportive wife at home that, that is supporting me with this, and she understands it's my hobby, and the kids understand it too, and we've made it fun, and talking about it and preparing for it, and my kids are young. My oldest, she just turned 5, but I think ultimately with something like this, it's I value the commitment because one, I've now learned to love hunting.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of amazing aspects to it. Um, but I look at it as an investment in almost personal growth, and then investment in a hobby that I can share with my children one day. And
Yep.
I didn't have family that hunted, but we live in a world now. We both aspire to be good fathers, and raise good children, right? That's
Absolutely.
top of mind for a lot of us.
Yep.
And we live in a world now that is just so filled, and with social media and with technology, and keeping the kids on screens, keeping us frankly on screens.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I mean, I'm a CPA, and I spend 10 hours in front of a computer screen, or on the phone,
Yeah, I mean,
every day. Hunting is a really good outlet for me to connect with nature, sort of leave the craziness of the world behind, and find sort of that inner peace, and build almost a brotherhood, and have the social aspect of hunting, right? Spending time
Yeah.
with you and
That's a good point.
other guys, and usually hunters are like-minded for the most
Yeah, for the
part.
most part.
So spending time, from that social aspect, and having that time away is good. It's needed. It's a good reset, and I invest the time now to learn this stuff so that I can share that with my kids down the road, teach them to hunt, get to spend days on it, 9 days down the road. I can
Yeah.
take my kids on a 9-day hunting trip with me and just bond with them.
Yeah, you're
You know?
looking at it like an investment in time in a sense.
Yep.
I think that as you were kind of talking about it, I was thinking about the 100-mile challenge that you were talking about,
Yeah.
right? So
Yep.
so when we did that challenge, like that was exercise and training towards it,
Yeah.
towards this, right? But that also was a time commitment too, because I looking back, like
It totally was.
having weekend after weekend after weekend, right? Because we were like
3 weekends.
to actually do it, but we also were like prepping to it too, right? Because even for me,
It's
like
true. Yeah.
getting on a treadmill, running, stairmaster, all that is great, but being able to put the pack on, like when I go to the gym, I can't have a backpack. They don't allow backpacks on the stairmaster
Yeah.
or something, so I have to go do that walking around the neighborhood or on a trail or whatever the case is. But testing gear out, I got to go and be out on the trail. Like I remember, I tested 3 different packs out this year, and then and it's not that my pack was bad. I have a bunch of different gear that I wanted to test, so I tried 3 different packs, and
Yeah.
you know, and then you got to get the time under that, and you got to build up into whatever the other commitment is of like, oh, I want to get this amount of mileage, and then you want to prepare for, oh man, now this weekend, like you're building up to, I got to do 35 miles in a weekend, and then you got another weekend.
Yeah.
Before you know it, I mean, it was like weekend after weekend after weekend.
No, you're right.
That's
Because we were sneaking in those like rucks of
yeah.
like 5 to 6 miles.
Well, and I even think about you, like I didn't know you were doing it, but you you surprised me. I don't know, a couple weeks ago when you were like, "Hey, I've been hiking every morning. I've been waking up at 5 and I got my pack on and
Yeah.
I'm walking around the neighborhood for miles
Yeah.
in my hunting clothes, in my
Yeah.
boots." And
Yeah.
I'm like, "Dude, good for him. Like
Yeah.
that's awesome and that's like great commitment." But again, that's like you're waking up with purpose to get stuff done.
Yeah.
And that's commitment, right? Like it's easy
Yeah.
to be a slouch and slap the buzzer 15 times before you wake up, and then you roll out of bed, get your coffee, and go to work.
And I think that 100-mile challenge really put it in gear for me of like it's important to do this stuff because you don't want to be caught with your pants down.
Hell no. I mean,
Like
trust me, you're gonna be sore on the mountain.
Yeah.
But like you doing all these things beforehand makes it so much more bearable than because you wouldn't be able to complete it. That's the thing.
Yep.
Unless you're a savage in the gym and you just work out every day of the week and you build up to it. But I just don't think it's a good idea to just like not do anything and then just get smoked on the mountain. That part,
no,
that part sucks. I've just watched it destroy people, and then then they're at base camp or they're in the tent, just demoralized for the rest of the week. It really can crush your mind.
Yeah, and I think like if you want to do something, you will make it happen. Right? Like I think about it and I know we're all busy and I hate that word, but you make time for the things that are important to you, right? And
Dude,
like
spot on. Yep.
Like that's just what happened. And I look at myself and I'm a better person right now. Like, that I'm finally doing it. It's coming to fruition. I'm on this hump. But, I've always aspired to be a 5 a.m.er. Like, hey, it happened. I was doing it. And it got to the point, Alex, where like my body I would just wake up at 5:30, even if I went to sleep a little bit later. My body was waking up and I was like, and the days that I didn't go and ruck felt like a POS, like completely being frank.
Did you just feel like a slob? Or
you just like, I was up. I should have just done it, like, but, I was exercising more, right? And I was maybe more active. I was eating better. I was intermittent fasting. I've lost 13 pounds, since, we started this whole thing.
Yeah, that's great.
I found myself eating better. I found myself, not really drinking alcohol, and passing on alcohol in times where maybe I'd have a drink or two with friends or with family where I just wasn't worth it because, it was more important for me to wake up at 5:30 and go ruck. And I don't want to feel like crap and have my body have to recover and go through that whole process. And I follow a guy by the name of Joe DeCina. He's the founder and owner of the Spartan Death Race.
Okay.
He bought Tough Mudder as well.
Okay.
And, if you follow him, if any of you guys, you follow him on social media, his whole mindset is do hard things. Challenge yourself, eat healthy, but challenge yourself, do hard things, push yourself. And when you're doing those things and you're either sign up for a race or a hunt or whatever it is, something that is going to take training, you're going to start making better choices in your life leading up to that. And I think like for me, it's absolutely that. Because it's a challenge that I've never done this before. I'd taken it seriously and, I started just changing different life things. And frankly, I think I'm a man for it. Um, so it's been good. You know, after this hunt, I think, you know, I'm going to have my eyes opened even more my training and my fitness could be better. And,
Yeah.
you know, if I'm going to enjoy this so much, which I'm pretty confident I will,
Yeah.
I'm going to want to do this again. So, you know, that prep is going to start way early. It's going to start the day we get back from the trip, right?
Yeah. You definitely will. I, I really can't wait for the time back when we're like, I mean, obviously I want to enjoy this hunt, so I'm just talking about like, I just know that there's this factor of recap when you're coming back home, you immediately start reflecting. It's the reflection point of it,
Yeah.
you know. So it's cool, man. I'm so excited for you. It's gonna
Yeah.
be sweet. So, but I just know it's a big personal commitment, and I'm very curious in another person's perspective what that's like, because I feel like my life revolves around it.
Yeah.
I feel like my purpose, in a weird way, is staying fit to be able to do some physically demanding things.
Yeah.
And I like the hard stuff, but I also know it's super easy to take the easy way out, and I have to talk myself out of it sometimes. You know,
Oh, it's always going to
it's
be that, right?
it's like
The temptation is always going to be there.
it's the devil talking to you. you
Totally
yeah, you
is.
know. So
I'm a
it's true.
spiritual guy, and I mean, I believe in that. I believe that, you know, whether you believe in that kind of stuff or not, but there's always a voice, you know, that is kind of trying to bring you back to, you know, that it doesn't want you to be better, right? It doesn't want you to push. Why is it? Why is it so hard to diet? Why is it so hard to exercise? Why is it so hard to read, to study, to do these things that eventually are going to reap so
it's
many
easy.
more benefits for you,
All
right?
those things are like, not doing those things is easy,
It's
right?
easy.
So
So like if
hard is
hard is hard for a reason because there's a benefit to it.
exactly. Yep. And this is it. Like, this is going to be physically harder.
Yeah.
You know, so they're just kind of getting into the mind frame of that, which is cool. So it's a cool transition for you.
Yeah.
I think one perspective I would like to hear, right? Like, I totally enjoy I like the planning part of it.
Yeah.
To me, it's exciting. I know everybody likes the gear part. The gear part it's fun, but the planning aspect of the actual hunt is what I enjoy. And
Yeah.
some people hate it,
Yep.
like the logistics and all that.
Yep.
So, like, in your perspective, is that was that a nice to have, where that's kind of like been covered off, or was it like, man, I wish I did more planning into that
Yeah.
perspective?
So I think for me, it's a really good question, and I think it's a very big part of a hunt because there's so many things that are, and it can frankly be overwhelming, right? Of what's needed for somebody who's doing their first out west hunt, right? Like me, where you got to spend the time, you got to identify what gear you need,
You know?
and then you do the research. Well, what do you want? Then
Yeah.
it's figuring out when are they going to be on sale, or you know, pull the
Your
trigger, right?
sales.
I never got a bad deal in my life. Alex knows that. So
love
one of the well, it's funny because I texted you, I texted our group, you know, who you sent me a postcard, you know, and they said that their biggest sale of the year is coming up this weekend.
Yeah, you were like,
50%
it's too
off.
late or
I'm
something.
like, it's fucker, it's way too late. I already bought all that shit, I already spent my money, but didn't get a bad deal. But anyways, right? So like for me, it's, you know, that part was pretty consuming of, you know, well, what gear do I need? What do I want? Ordering it, getting it, testing it out, playing around with it, you know, and then getting prepared for a drive like this, right? Making sure I had the right emergency gear in the truck, creating the pack and the system and how I wanted to travel with all that gear. You know, so the planning aspect, the actual meat and potatoes, you know,
It is the meat and potatoes, yeah.
of the hunt, you took care of and East to West took care of, right? And, you know, not to mention, you know, the whole tag and application process of what's involved there and what species you want to hunt, where you want to hunt it, what units, all of that good stuff is something that, you know, you handle for all of us. And then the planning, the actual hunt plan. So like you got all this stuff, you got the clothes, you're going to drive out there, fly out there. Now what? You know, you got the unit. Where are you going to hunt?
Yeah.
What is going to be the plan? what areas are you going to hunt? Where are the elk going to be? Um, where can you set up camp? Where can you filter water? Um, where's the nearest gas station? Like,
Yeah, all
the
those
entire
details.
logistics of it, right? What time of where you're going to leave, when you're going to leave, and all of that stuff is something that you put together. Downloading the maps of where you're going to be, and then the areas, right? And
Yeah, I like that 3D overview, and doing it with, like, we did it with the whole group, but I think that's such a cool piece to it with, like, putting all the points and plot it on a map and show you the mountain. Because, like, even for you, I just remember, like, watching your reaction when we were going through it, and I could tell on your face, it was like, holy crap.
yeah,
But some people really like that. So that's
right.
why I was asking you, like some people really like it, and some people are like, man, I don't want to deal with any of that stuff, or it's too overwhelming.
So I
And
think I think I think this, Alex. I think for somebody like me, like it's time, right? And
yeah, I guess that, yeah,
it's
that
time.
hits on it.
Time is a big one. But I think it ultimately is going to be where I'm at too in my hunting, in my seasonality and tenure of hunting, right? So like this year was a lot of it was consumed with, you know, getting everything ready, right? And just preparing myself mentally and physically. But then maybe next year or years down the road, I'll be a little bit more interested now that I know more, now that I've experienced more, I know what to look for. And like, I'll probably spend hours looking at the maps that you sent. I'll know how to read them. I'll know what this exactly means, what kind of
Yeah,
terrain this translates to, and, enjoying that maybe a little bit more, or just learning more about hunting in the process, and then being able to say, Alex, um, what about this or what about that? Or
yeah, make it interactive more.
I'm just too ignorant at this point, right?
Well,
Where,
that's
um,
fine, and we talked about it in length. I appreciate what you're saying though, but I think time is a big factor, right? Like as a professional, having time, right? And even for you, right? Like
yeah,
you're doing professional service to people, but uh, man, it's cool. I think that's a great add on it because I think there's different levels, and you're going to have your own evolution, just like from whitetail to western,
yep,
to then your evolution into the western hunting realm, and mind you, for this hunt, like you guys are hunting elk, I have a deer tag,
right,
so it's going to be interesting because there's going to be a little bit of a crossover. Like I always feel like when I have an elk tag in my pocket, I'm running into a bunch of deer, and if I have a deer tag, then I'm running an elk. So here, can't jinx us
and I'll
in
end into
that
a
way
bunch of
because we're going to
bears.
run into. I love it, but no, I mean, in reality, I always feel like in the elevation game of where we go, there's crossover with deer as you
Yeah,
kind of get with going to the elk. So that'll be a cool piece. I'm just really anxious to see your perspective on the way back after the hunt's
yeah,
done and kind of recapping it. So I think that'll set up or frame up a
yeah.
next episode of this. But
I will say this. I will say I'm really looking forward to, I remember you and I were chatting after one of our, planning calls with the group, and you showed the live 3D view of the mountain range, and
yeah,
um, I just thought to myself, it's just going to be really cool to be up there, no matter what kind of suck it's going to be to get up there, um, just to be there and like, look at the horizon and just see mountaintops and see a sunrise and a sunset. And, I've never been in a setting like that. And, you said, dude, I remember, vividly the first time I hunted out west.
hmm
It's just it's nostalgic for me, and it's like something I can't get out of my head. And
you'll never forget it.
like that's what I'm excited about. I'm excited for that like first experience of, you know, just being in a environment that I've never been in.
hmm
Um, and frankly, not a lot of people have been, at least not a lot of the people that I hang out with on a regular basis and that I work with on a regular basis have seen.
Yeah, no, I get it.
So, and I'm
That's
actually
awesome.
I'm really excited to bring that home and share that with friends and family. And I mean, how many people have said, like take pictures, take videos, and can't wait to see some
Oh,
of
yeah,
that
well,
stuff.
you'll have videos.
So,
I'm gonna try to record as much of this as possible
yeah,
too. So that'd be good. But
we're excited. I'm excited, and
even though I did not plan on videoing this, I somehow I can't not video it. That's
I
the
might have
thing.
talked you
Like,
into it a tad
I
bit.
just, yeah, maybe, but like, I feel like in relation to just, you don't get to go out that often, a week or two, maybe 3 weeks a year. I think last year I did 4 weeks out west and I videoed everything and it was awesome.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of work. So, anyways, I digress off of that. But yeah, I love it. Awesome, awesome convo. I think we covered off on a lot of topics that I was very curious about with you.
Yeah.
So I think the next step would be really kind of where we recap this and hear about it on the way back. But with that said, thanks for tagging along on this one and listening in. If you are on audio or video, either one, thanks for checking us out. Subscribe, like the channels. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon, and YouTube. So please give us a 5-star review. That would be awesome for the wonderful algorithm, especially as we start rolling on the podcast aspect. And then if you have your own desires of maybe getting out west, or maybe you just want some more help along the way with some professional planning, go ahead and check out East to West Hunts at www.east2westhunts.com. Shoot me an email if you have questions at info@east2westhunts.com. And then you also could check out on social media on Instagram at East to West Hunts. So with that said, everything else I think you'll be able to find if you've found this podcast. And yes, thanks for tagging along. And until next time, remember to scout, hunt, and repeat. Thanks.